What if success isn't just random luck? Not just about being in the right place at the right time. What if it's the result of an invisible, perfectly maintained ledger that's tracking every single action you take, making sure that nothing you contribute to the world is ever really lost?
Exactly. Imagine
Yeah.
a cosmic accounting system. Every email you send, every compliment you offer, even every shortcut you sneak past your own standards, it's all getting tallied. And that ledger, that precise internal record, it directly shapes what happens to you next week, next month, and next year.
That idea that life runs on this perfect kind of bookkeeping, that's the absolute heartbeat of this deep dive. You shared a ton of material with us on the law of compensation, and our mission today feels really critical. We need to pull this whole concept out of that vague proverb space, like what goes around comes around, and turn it into something real, like operational instructions. We want to hand you the control panel for this hidden accounting system.
Absolutely. This isn't about, mystical fluff. We're framing the law of compensation as a principle that's as concrete and as mathematically predictable as gravity. It's rooted in a simple truth that life operates on a perfect energetic exchange where value out equals value in. And to understand it, you need critical thinking.
Yeah.
You need to synthesize a lot of different perspectives. We're not just explaining what the law is, but why it matters, and crucially, how you can apply it tactically
Yeah.
in your daily life.
Right. Our goal is to give you a refreshingly clear, just a relentlessly practical roadmap for making this cosmic accounting system work for you. We're going to explore how to stop calling success good timing and maybe start calling it strategic giving. So let's dive into the core mechanics of how the universe, keeps score. So the first big hurdle to really embracing this law is the illusion of luck, right? We're all programmed to dismiss good things as a coincidence and bad things as misfortune. But the sources suggest we need to look closer. If this law is as fundamental as something like gravity, what exactly are the physics behind this universal balancing act?
Well, the foundation is really rooted in a parallel with physics. Think about Newton's third law. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. The law of compensation suggests this principle applies to everything, all the non-physical stuff too. The medium doesn't matter. The exchange does. So whether we're trading in time, kindness, skill, creative energy, or money, the universe kind of acts like a closed system.
Okay, so if I push value out, value has to come back. But I think for a lot of people listening, the question that pops up right away is how does morality or, effort fit into a purely mechanical equation like Newton's law? How do you bridge that scientific gap between me cleaning up a coffee spill and then getting a massive career opportunity months down the line?
That is the critical question, because the compensation doesn't necessarily return in the same currency, so to speak. The bridge is this energetic principle of balance, not some sort of immediate moral judgment. Imagine an old-fashioned brass scale like we talked about. On one side, you've got everything you contribute, effort at work, empathy for a friend, the attention you give, the problems you solve. And on the other plate, the returns start to pile up. Promotions, loyalty, unexpected checks, favors, insights. The mechanism is simple. The scale might creak slowly, it might wobble, but the architecture of reality it demands that the weight has to settle eventually. The compensation might have traveled this invisible arc, but the energetic mass balanced out all the same.
And that explains the illusion of luck so perfectly. What looks like a lucky break from a distance is usually just the compound interest of value that someone has been pouring into the world for ages. If you really look closely at high achievers, you find this consistent trail of, donated weekends, handwritten thank you cards, long forgotten favors they did for no immediate payoff. They're consistently adding more to life's reservoir than they're taking out.
They get it. They understand the mechanism is predictable. The sources actually break this down into a really reliable three-stage cycle that these high achievers tend to follow, even if it's unconsciously. The first stage is initiation. This is when you perform a generous, uncharged act, something you do without expecting a receipt, something you'd probably just call no big deal. The extra effort, the unasked for kindness, and crucially, the outcome is totally uncertain at this point.
And then comes the really hard part, the psychological challenge.
Exactly. Stage 2 is dormancy. Days, months, maybe even years go by with what feels like nothing. Perceived stasis, you might feel like your efforts are totally futile. Nothing seems to change, and this is when most people quit. They mistake that root-building phase for stagnation.
And then payoff.
The third stage is convergence. This is when multiple previously separate benefits just sort of coalesce inside a very narrow time frame. The return doesn't arrive as a trickle, it comes in like a flood. And it looks miraculous or lucky to outsiders who only saw the beginning and the end. but not the middle.
I have the perfect story for this, the one from the material you referenced. It embodies this full cycle perfectly for me. Years ago, I was maybe 19, struggling to pay tuition, working behind the counter of this campus coffee shop, and this frazzled grad student shuffles in, juggling a stack of books he just could not manage. And on an impulse, I stepped from behind the counter, totally crossing the boundary of my job description.
Yeah.
I wiped down a table, balanced his precarious stack, and walked him to a seat. It was a momentary, uncharged act of service. That was the initiation.
And did anything happen right away?
Nothing. I think he smiled. Maybe he just grunted. I have no idea. I just went back to making lattes. And that was the dormancy period. But maybe an hour later, a woman wearing a university ID badge slid this folded note across the counter. It said, "I saw what you did for my student. That level of empathy is rare. We need people like you in the department. Apply for the research assistant position. Use my name."
And that led to a job at triple your coffee shop wage,
Yeah.
launching your whole professional career.
It felt like a straight-up miracle back then. But looking back now, through this lens of compensation, it was a precise payment, the value I deposited, that little bit of time and empathy. It converged with an opportunity I didn't even know existed.
And you see this contrast so clearly in that anecdote about the two startups, Maya and Leo. They both launched really compelling app ideas. Maya went into what you'd call pure execution mode. She just vanished into these coding marathons, only coming up for air to pitch investors. Her focus was totally narrow, effort applied directly to getting capital.
She was tracking the effort she was putting in, for sure, but maybe not the value she was generating for anyone else beyond just her product.
Precisely. Now, Leo, he was just as immersed in development, but he made a very conscious decision. He spent his Friday afternoons volunteering at a high school STEM club, offering free code reviews, mentoring kids. He served his local community for 2 years without ever even mentioning his startup.
So fast forward 2 years, and both of their apps hit that financial wall. Maya's narrow focus meant her network was tapped out. She had to shutter her company, and she just cited terrible luck.
Meanwhile, Leo's consistent unpaid service, all those deposits into the societal sphere, had been accruing compound interest, this deep, sincere goodwill. When his funding ran low, one of his old high school mentees, who is now a star intern at a major accelerator, invited him to speak at this minor industry event. At that event, he met a powerful venture partner whose own niece remembered Leo with just profound admiration from the STEM club. That partner injected fresh capital and rescued Leo's company on the spot.
So to an outsider, it looks like Leo got lucky because a former student just happened to invite him to a mixer. But Leo had been laying up all these credits in that moral ledger for years before the critical moment ever arrived. His convergence was overwhelming because the interest on his early deposits, goodwill, reputation, sincere admiration, it all paid off at once.
To make this abstract balancing act more operational, we need a concrete framework. And that brings us to the central metaphor in the material, the life bank account. Think of it as an invisible vault that's tracking every deed, every word, every intention you initiate. This system takes abstract virtues like integrity and generosity, and it renders them into a tangible, measurable currency.
I love that metaphor because it makes the idea of budgeting your behavior suddenly make sense. If I know that integrity is a high-yield deposit, I'm going to guard it a lot more carefully.
And the grand principle is unwavering. Value out equals value in. Life is keeping score, even when you're completely oblivious to the tally. When you take without proactively resupplying, you inevitably drift toward an overdraft notice, which, it manifests as missed opportunities, drained relationships, this chronic dissatisfaction, and just that persistent feeling of things not working out.
Okay, so let's define deposits really clearly. What exactly is fueling this compounding engine beyond just, money or time?
A deposit is any action, thought, or intention that adds value, whether it's to yourself, to another person, or to the collective. The obvious deposits are things like mentoring a new coworker or doing excellent surplus work when no one is watching. But the crucial, often overlooked deposits are the ones that maintain your own internal equilibrium.
Like what, for example?
Deciding to rest so you can serve with renewed energy. That's a huge deposit. Forgiving someone, which dissolves this emotional friction you were paying energy interest on. Setting firm boundaries that protect your integrity and your time. Those internal deposits, the ones focused on self-stewardship, they actually yield the highest long-term returns.
And these small, consistent deposits compound over time. That's the secret. The story of Selena, who is stuck in her entry-level job, it illustrates the power of these microdeposits building up a kind of social proof.
Right. Selena felt trapped, invisible, constantly overlooked for promotion. But instead of just lobbying her boss, she changed her deposits. She became hyper-intentional. She started organizing meeting notes in a format that saved her manager 2 hours of review time every single week. She always shared credit generously on group projects, and she greeted every single person in the building, from the CEO to the maintenance staff by name, asking about their weekend.
She wasn't just performing her job, she was performing a service.
Exactly. And 6 months later, when a vacancy opened up in project management, her name flew off three tongues in the decision meeting. Why? Because she had made deposits across the entire organizational structure. Her rise seemed meteoric to people who only saw the job title change, but it was just compounded interest paying out on hundreds of small, intentional acts of service and connection.
Okay, so now let's talk about the withdrawals. Not all withdrawals are these big, dramatic things like stealing or lying. They're often incredibly subtle, these silent drains that can bleed our accounts dry.
They accumulate invisibly. Cutting corners on quality, engaging in malicious gossip, chronic indifference to other people's struggles, or maybe the most insidious one, just neglecting your own physical and mental health. Forgetting to say thank you is a tiny drip.
Yeah.
Snapping at someone because you prioritized a deadline over having lunch is another. The real danger is in their accumulation. It's like a leaky faucet running all night. You end up with a massive, unexpected water bill.
I totally recognize my own early travel days in that description. I used to see flying as this necessary inconvenience, and I'd just bury my head in headphones, strictly avoiding interaction. I saw the plane as my little recuperation zone, my time to hoard energy. But what I missed was the chance to offer a friendly word or share a genuine conversation.
And what was the withdrawal cost of that?
That refusal to contribute small civility was a subtle withdrawal that deprived me of potential allyship and fresh, unexpected perspectives that I would later need for content development. When I needed a favor or a connection in a strange city, my previous behavior had already sent this subtle message of isolation. That lack of allyship, that was the overdraft fee.
Conversely, the deposits you earn in solitude carry immense weight because the universe notices everything. Integrity in isolation is high-value currency because it proves your intentions are non-conditional.
Like that story from grad school, finding that unmarked envelope with a crisp stack of bills in the library. My own tuition expenses were weighing on me, so the temptation was real, but I turned it into lost and found without telling anyone I knew.
And 2 weeks later, the relieved owner, a woman named Amani, she tracked you down. Crucially, your integrity, which you demonstrated in isolation, led directly to trust. You became study partners, and through her father's connections, you later secured an internship in Nairobi, a cornerstone experience that shaped your entire career. That turned out to be the most profitable non-transaction you ever made. The universe tracks the deeds you do when your only audience is yourself.
That brings us to this myth of the one-time windfall. What about lottery winners? I mean, they make no deposits, yet they receive millions. Why do they so often fail?
History shows us that an astounding percentage of lottery winners, or people who get sudden inheritances without any preparation, declare bankruptcy within 5 years. It's staggering. They receive this immense financial wealth, but they crucially lack the internal deposits, discipline, gratitude, patience, stewardship that are required to hold the wealth and grow it ethically.
The wealth is given, but the capacity to manage it isn't.
Precisely. Without that foundation of character and that internalized balance, the blessing often becomes lethal. It's like handing a teenager the keys to a race car without any driver training. A windfall without the foundation of previous, slow, integrity-driven deposits just collapses under its own weight. So, the Life Bank account operates perfectly, but the whole system can jam when we introduce a critical belief barrier. The scarcity mindset. This is the invisible wall, this deep-seated belief that giving something away reduces our own reserves, that the world is a zero-sum game.
Scarcity convinces you that you could be swimming in an infinite ocean and still worry about running out of water. It just overrides all logic. It causes you to accept a higher salary, but simultaneously worry that it's still not enough. Your mind is constantly whispering, what if I give too much time or too much effort and I don't get it back?
And this often starts in childhood. If you grew up hearing phrases like, money doesn't grow on trees, or we can't afford that, those early impressions engrave beliefs that are stronger than any isolated adult achievement. By the time we reach our professional lives, we've collected thousands of tiny impressions, all whispering the same hymn. there's never enough, so you better hoard what you have.
And neuroscience actually explains the physical toll of this kind of deprivation thinking. It's not just a philosophical problem.
Oh, absolutely. When you genuinely believe resources are limited, your amygdala, your brain's fight or flight center, it just lights up instantly. Cortisol floods your system, and that narrows your cognitive focus to immediate survival. That severely reduces the cognitive bandwidth you need for complex problem solving and for seeing latent opportunities.
So the anxiety of scarcity literally makes you less intelligent and less capable of spotting compensation when it appears.
It does. I mean, studies have shown that subjects who are forced to imagine being short on cash perform significantly worse on IQ tests. Scarcity puts your brain in this survival fog. It closes the cognitive aperture you need to see all the non-obvious ways compensation might arrive, like a mentor's quiet offer or a surprising connection. It makes overdrawing your bank account more likely because you just can't see the path to profitability.
And scarcity is sneaky, right? It wears these costumes in the professional world. It rarely sounds like, I'm poor.
What are its favorite disguises that high achievers should be watching out for?
Perfectionism is a massive one. It hides this underlying fear of wasting effort or facing rejection. The logic is, if I do it flawlessly, then my work won't be rejected and I won't lose time or status or energy. It's an attempt to control the outcome because the giver is terrified of loss.
And procrastination, I mean, that's often just seen as laziness. Procrastination is often a scarcity response. It's delaying action to preserve your stored resources, time, emotional energy, reputation, until the delay itself becomes more costly. The perfectionist says, I can't start unless it's perfect. The procrastinator says, I can't spend the energy yet, just in case I need it for something else later.
And we also see it in the form of just extreme busyness
Well,
or time hoarding.
exactly. You decline invitations, you avoid phone calls, you shut your office door because you don't have a second to spare. Busyness becomes this self-imposed fortress against new demands, but in doing that, it also locks out new sources of joy, connection, and the unexpected opportunities that fuel compensation.
We have to talk about the receiving side of this too. Scarcity often just strangles our ability to receive, which is the other half of the compensation cycle.
Generosity and receiving are fundamentally twins. They're the process of exhaling and inhaling the universe's energy. Deflecting gifts or compliments, saying, oh, it was nothing, when someone praises you, that's often a scarcity response because receiving can trigger vulnerability or a kind of debt-based guilt. You tell yourself that humility demands you wave away the credit, but what you're actually doing is blocking the natural return flow.
I can personally attest to this. After giving a major speech one time, I nearly refused this leather-bound notebook a guy tried to give me. He said my talk helped him reconcile with his estranged father.
I started to say, oh, you didn't need to do that, but I caught myself and I just took it.
Yeah.
And inside was this profound handwritten letter about forgiveness that became this powerful personal compensation for me. Just the knowledge that my words could help mend a family.
And had you rejected that physical gift, you would have robbed both of you of that emotional closure and compensation. Receiving is a necessary act of trust. It keeps a loop alive, it validates the giver's contribution, and it maintains the architecture of compensation. Okay, so we've established the foundational physics, and we've hopefully removed the psychological blockage of scarcity. Now we need the blueprint for conscious creation. The material presents this as the compensation equation. Effort aligned with authentic value equals inevitable, proportionate return. Let's decode this EVR triad, starting with effort.
Right. Effort, visible input, is the metric that people misjudge the most. The law measures not just the quantity, how many midnight emails you sent, but 3 dimensions: quality, consistency, and alignment. Consistency, like Maya practicing her guitar for 20 minutes every single day, will always outperform sporadic bursts, like Liam practicing for 3 hours but only on Sunday. The law of compensation prefers that steady rhythm of microdeposits because they build momentum.
And alignment is so key. If I spend Herculean effort pushing against a locked door, say, perfecting a product that absolutely nobody wants, that effort is just wasted. It's high effort, low value.
Precisely. You have to ensure your energy is directed toward an activity that people or markets already need. High effort combined with low value just generates exhaustion and resentment, and both of those are negative withdrawals from your account.
Okay, so that brings us to value, invisible multiplier. This is where I think most people get tripped up. How do we define value when we're talking about an invisible ledger?
Value is the benefit experienced by others. It's assessed by resonance or impact. A product is valuable when it solves a problem. A joke is valuable only when someone laughs. The core principle is that the size of your compensation is proportional to the magnitude of the problem you solve or the possibility you create for other people.
And the sources break this down into three crucial forms of value. We need to be able to spot these.
Yes. The three forms are, first, functional value. This is the practical, tangible result. It solves a clear problem. An accountant files your taxes correctly, saves you money. Second is emotional value. This alters the internal state of the recipient. It generates relief or joy or a feeling of belonging. A therapist helping you process trauma or a great piece of art that inspires you. And third is symbolic value. This projects identity or status. It communicates belonging or aspiration. Think of a luxury brand watch or a meticulously crafted report that signals the user's high competency. The richest and highest compensation always comes when you can integrate all three. If your effort results in a report that's functional, that makes the client feel relieved, emotional, and signals their professional excellence, symbolic, then the compensation multiplier is maximized.
So the key is shifting your focus from how hard did I work to how much of a difference did my work actually make?
Absolutely. And finally, that brings us to return. Balanced output. This is multidimensional. It's not just money. It's trust, reputation, inner peace, intellectual property. The failure to recognize these non-monetary returns is why people so often misjudge the law. And returns have timelines, immediate versus decades. If you only look at your bank account on Tuesday, you might completely miss the long-term trust you earned on Monday.
The case study of Emily, the freelancer, illustrates this perfectly, this decoupling of effort and value.
Emily was a brilliant graphic designer, and she was just grinding away, billing hourly. Her effort was immense, but her return was low. Why? Because her logos were generating millions in sales for her clients, meaning her value was explosive. But her return was tracking her low hourly fee. She was getting paid for her time, effort, not her impact, value.
So how did she make that shift?
She realized she was providing profound symbolic and emotional value. She switched to value-based pricing. She started demonstrating precisely how one of her rebrands increased a specific client's revenue by 20%. And then she demanded a percentage of the value created. She didn't work a single hour more, but she tripled her rate. Her understanding and her articulation of value changed, not her effort.
That psychological shift is everything. It's the difference between selling hours and selling transformation. Applying that EVR equation really shifts our focus from just earning a living to actively building capital in our careers. This isn't just about a static resume, it's about a living portfolio that accumulates with every single action.
We call this compensation capital. It's accumulated with every email, every meeting, every project decision. It's an invisible balance that influences which opportunities, which projects, and which mentors come your way. The balance is real, even if you don't get a monthly statement in the mail.
And this capital rests on three pillars: skill, attitude, and reputation. Skill is tangible, but how do we measure the more elusive pillars, attitude and reputation?
Right. Skill is measurable. It's delivering the design on time or closing the sale. Attitude is the energetic quality you bring to the table. Humility, resilience, and the absence of entitlement or cynicism. It's that willingness to learn and to own your mistakes.
So how can a listener actively track and cultivate their attitude?
Self-assessment is key. Ask yourself, how many times this week did I accept criticism without getting defensive or use feedback? And reputation is the long echo of your repeated behaviors. It's the story that's told about you when you're not in the room. You can actually quantify reputation by tracking how many unsolicited referrals or recommendations you receive, or how often you're invited to high-leverage meetings purely because of your perceived competence and character.
So the key then is turning everyday tasks, even the mundane ones, into high-value deposits by adding what you call surplus value.
Yes. The size of the deposit depends on how much surplus value you add to the task, not on how glamorous the original task was. Look at Laura, the project coordinator. She felt stuck doing basic coordination. So she decided to add surplus value by quietly preparing an investor-ready walkthrough presentation that included risk analysis and a 5-year projection analysis that was far beyond her job description.
So she did the thinking that saved leadership the time of figuring out the next steps.
Exactly. That spontaneous contribution saving leadership time and revealing this hidden competence was a massive, high-leverage deposit. A few weeks later, she was promoted to project manager, which was really just a validation of the role she was already performing.
That's the entrepreneurial mindset in action, acting like a service provider who's addressing unmet needs better than anyone else, but from within the company.
And the story of Caroline the assistant is the ultimate example of this compounding effect. She started as an admin assistant, just scheduling meetings and managing expenses. But she added incredible surplus value. She mastered the scheduling tool. She reconciled complex product roadmaps with investor decks. She strategically studied regulatory guidelines on her weekends.
She was investing in her future role, not just her current one.
Her consistency and her strategic giving meant she built these profound relationships and competence across all departments. She wasn't just efficient, she became indispensable. 8 years later, she was the chief operating officer. Leadership simply validated what was already evident in her compensation capital ledger. She had already earned that job long before she was ever given the title. When we shift from career capital to relationships, the currency changes. It goes from salary and prestige to social capital. Relationships trade in time, attention, empathy, and honest words. And when these are given generously, they multiply and are returned in times of need.
In our modern, completely distracted age, the rarest currency has to be attention.
It's priceless and it's finite. Full-face attention, phone down, eye contact, listening to understand rather than just to reply, that creates an immediate energetic lift for the person you're with. That immediate emotional compensation often sets the stage for future reciprocity.
And the law applies universally, right? Even at the executive level. That CEO anecdote perfectly illustrates how you can't just silo your behavior.
I was coaching a CEO who gave full-face attention to her junior staff, and she cultivated all this adoration and loyalty from them. However, she had a habit of reading internal reports during her executive meetings, splitting her focus. Her peers felt consistently devalued. They sensed she saw their time as less valuable than the staff's time. And when she needed peer support for a critical strategic initiative, her colleagues strategically blocked her.
So she received loyalty from her direct reports. That was the compensation for her attention there. But she faced friction from her peers, which was compensation for her lack of attention there. The law balanced the scale precisely.
Absolutely. Even a tiny gesture, if it's sincere, can have a giant impact on setting the tone.
Like the story of Jasmine, the neighbor.
Right. Jasmine left a handwritten welcome note with some local tips when a new family moved in. That simple 10-minute act set a tone of proactive generosity. That single deposit compounded into shared babysitters, combined holidays, emergency hospital runs, and years of mutual support. The initial generosity just ripples outward, and it sets a default norm of high-trust reciprocity that serves both parties far beyond that initial small investment.
But the material warns about the martyr trap here, which we introduced earlier, and it's so critical for relationship health.
Yes, Thomas, the dependable friend. He constantly gave his time, his money, his emotional support. However, he never expressed his own needs. He was afraid that asking for help would somehow negate his role as the giver. So he taught his friends, through his actions, that he required nothing.
And so when he finally needed genuine support, a shoulder to lean on, he felt unappreciated and isolated.
His emotional account showed these massive withdrawals because he was the only one who was ever allowed to make deposits. He felt cheated because his friends didn't show up for him, but they didn't show up because he had implicitly taught them they didn't need to. Receiving, the material emphasizes, is not only the other half of giving, it's the vital instruction manual for how other people can love and support you. So now we entered the realm of finance, but we're looking at it through the lens of energy, not scarcity. Money isn't stagnant, it's kinetic energy. It's a social technology that evolved to enhance human cooperation, and it is always looking for circulation.
And if we treat money as magnetic, drawn to usefulness, purpose, and generosity, it will obey those qualities. The law of compensation is basically the governing algorithm of the entire money network. Value out, value in.
The energetic quality of earnings is so key here. You are paid for the problem you solve or the possibility you create. High earners don't just sell products. They sell emotional relief, confidence, or optimism. The financial return mirrors the intention attached to the effort. Fear, derived from scarcity, repels money. Magnetism, derived from a genuine intention to serve, attracts it.
The speaker's personal anecdote about selling custom furniture is a perfect illustration of shifting the energetic quality of an offering.
Right. The speaker initially focused on lumber, costs, and joinery, and time-all functional value. The pitch was about the materials. When they shifted, they started selling memory capsules, a table large enough for 30 family members for Thanksgiving. The pitch was suddenly about belonging, legacy, and shared history. It was all emotional value.
And they quadrupled their income without changing a single tool in their workshop.
Because the emotional quality changed. They shifted from selling wood and joints to selling possibility. Clients paid a premium because they weren't buying a product. They were buying a foundational element for their family's future memories.
And spending is just sending your signature out into the world. It's an act of compensation, too.
Every purchase you make casts a vote for the world you wish to inhabit. Your spending should align with your authentic values. Ask yourself, will this spend expand me or will it just numb me?
Hmm.
Hoarding money is as imbalanced as impulse buying. Stagnation just breeds more scarcity thinking. Money has to circulate, and it should carry purpose and gratitude with it.
The power of circulation is so beautifully demonstrated in the deep dive into Sunrise Grocers.
The owner, Mr. Watkins, was struggling fiercely against the big box stores. Initially, he operated from fierce slashing prices, which led to thin margins and high turnover. Then he switched tactics. He started operating on energetic principles. He raised his employees' wages significantly. He committed to sourcing local produce exclusively. He created this high-visibility community bulletin board, and he launched a constant roundup program for a local charity.
That sounds like a massive initial profit dip, trading cash for goodwill.
It was. The initial profit dipped, but the energetic exchange was activated. Energy flowed back through fierce customer loyalty and community goodwill. This was followed by 15% net profit growth and a 30% surge in top-line revenue because customers were willing to pay a premium for the integrity of his operation. And that charity work brought priceless media coverage that no marketing budget could ever buy. Energy out, energy back, the compensation balanced the books and rewrote that store's story through intentional, value-based circulation.
Okay, this is the part where the law of compensation requires the most faith and patience. We are conditioned to expect immediate results, but the material insists on this necessary pause between planting and harvest.
The law does not promise instant applause. It insists on a gestation period. If you plant an oak tree seed, you don't go out the next day expecting to find shade. The interval between sowing and reaping is not a void. It's an invisible laboratory where your internal and external investments are taking shape.
And this is that concept of the invisible compound curve. Progress often hides behind what the material calls a plateau of latent potential.
Exactly. It's like the Chinese bamboo seedling that spends 4 years building this foundational root system completely underground before suddenly erupting 80 feet in year 5. The reward began accruing on day 1, even if the visibility lagged. Most people abandon their efforts when results lag because they mistake the pause for futility.
The ice cube analogy clarifies this so perfectly. We really need to internalize this idea to survive that dormancy period.
Right. The ice cube remains solid and appears completely unchanged until it hits 33 degrees Fahrenheit. All the thermal increments, all the effort leading up to that point are essential, and they are not wasted even though the visible melting, the return, only starts at that tipping point. The problem is most people quit at 32 degrees. They're convinced their effort was fruitless, failing to realize they were just 1 degree away from visible success.
That 32-degree moment, I bet everyone listening knows exactly what that feels like. How do you coach someone through that specific emotional wall?
You coach them by reminding them that momentum is invisible. The law of compensation mandates that the energy is being stored, even if the form isn't recognizable yet. You use their own past examples. The time they thought they failed a test but scraped a pass, the project they felt was useless but led to a new contact, to prove the pattern of delayed convergence in their own life.
And this applies directly to businesses, as we saw with the bookshop case study.
Henry and Maya ran a boutique bookshop. They faced intense competition and they doubled down on community building despite having sustained financial losses for 18 months. They hosted author nights, offered free coffee, started a personalized recommendation corner. That whole period felt like a futile investment. Just constant input with delayed output.
But they were building that intangible capital social trust and a reputation for expertise.
Their consistent, highly personalized deposits of goodwill paid off when a local high school teacher shared their recommendation corner, calling it a local treasure, in a widely circulated education newsletter. This led to a massive influx of regional traffic and tourist interest. The social capital matured and converged all at once, leading to a massive sales spike in their 3rd year. The compensation was proportional to their 18 months of consistent, non-transactional effort.
We touched on this earlier, but we really need to dedicate some time to the martyr trap, because generosity, if it's unbalanced, can become this destructive self-sacrifice. It actually violates the law of compensation for the self.
Martyrdom masquerades as virtue, but its essence is compulsion. It's giving to avoid guilt, or to seek validation, or to prove your worthiness. Healthy giving flows from genuine choice, and it leaves you feeling satisfied and energized. The litmus test is simple. If you feel chronically drained, invisible, or irritable after helping someone, you have crossed the line into martyrdom.
This is a devastating energy economics problem. Martyrdom operates at a daily deficit.
Yes, Alicia, the nonprofit director who worked 12-hour days. She felt essential, but she was constantly running on fumes. She was operating in an 80-unit daily deficit, effectively withdrawing from her own health and personal life to fund her work. The universe mirrors this chronic self-neglect through lost opportunities, poor health, or burnout. The cure isn't to simply work harder. It's to balance the equation to include yourself as the primary recipient of your own care.
And this means setting boundaries, which so many people confuse with selfishness.
Boundaries are bridges. They define the edges of safe passage and ensure that your giving flows from choice, not coercion. They don't sever connection. In fact, clear boundaries actually increase your perceived value and ensure the quality of your giving remains high.
I remember my own internal struggle when I set that firm boundary. No sessions on Sundays, no calls after 5 p.m. I was convinced my clients would balk, that they'd see me as less dedicated.
And instead, what happened?
They accepted it immediately. My reputation wasn't damaged. It was strengthened because my time gained clarity and value. My evenings regained color, and I had renewed energy for Monday. The bridge held, and the compensation was immediate rest and vitality.
The material shows that improved self-balance actually increases your professional capacity and attraction. Look at Laura the counselor. She was driven by this need to be superhuman, which resulted in chronic burnout, anxiety, and guilt. It was only after she established self-care rituals, daily lunchtime walks, a non-work-related pottery class, that her internal balance improved.
And her improved equilibrium acted like a magnet, shifting the quality of the opportunities she received.
Her clients and her peers noticed her clarity and her resilience. Her improved internal balance attracted a district-level leadership role, with higher pay and a lower crisis volume. Compensation rewards sustainable value, not self-inflicted depletion. So once you've established this healthy, sustainable giving, you can now appreciate the profound reach of the ripple effect. This phenomenon allows these small, seemingly insignificant choices to set waves in motion that reach people and circumstances you never ever anticipated.
It's the simple act of one pebble creating countless geometric circles. The impact is exponential, not linear.
Take that anecdote of the coffee spill in the hotel lobby. A business traveler accidentally spilled his coffee, and he immediately got on his knees to clean it up with courtesy, not entitlement, despite being dressed in an expensive suit. This small act led to a housekeeping supervisor posting about the respect he showed on her personal, private blog.
And how did that become compensation?
An event organizer read that post 2 years later, recognized the traveler's company name, and was so impressed by this story of character that they reached out and offered him a keynote invitation in Singapore. The ripple effect proves that invisible audiences are always watching, and the energy of respect always finds its way back.
It's the compounding of generosity, where these tiny acts can multiply into lifelong affirmations.
Elena's father, a stern engineer, was hard on her academically. After she failed a high school math exam, she found a post-it note on her desk that said, "Failure is information, not identity. Love you." That 10-second act compounded into a lifelong affirmation of her worth, which Elena then carried into her own teaching career, replicating that same kindness and perspective for her own struggling students. That emotional deposit continues to pay interest across generations.
And sometimes the compensation takes a decade, yet the memory of the goodwill just remains pristine.
That's the story of Mr. Thomas, the whistling janitor at the university. He worked for years, quietly learning the students' names, asking about their studies, just showing presence. He received no public acknowledgement at all. When the graduating class, a decade later, invited him to speak at the commencement ceremony, they gave him a spontaneous 5-minute standing ovation.
They remembered the value he deposited in their lives.
The value he deposited was small, consistent emotional support and dignity, often when they felt invisible. The pond kept its memory for over a decade, and the return was overwhelming public collective recognition of a life well served.
The ripple effect is inspiring, but we have to address the moments when the law seems profoundly broken.
Yeah.
What happens when you pour out goodwill, effort, and integrity, and only unfairness seems to come back? How can the law of compensation explain decades of suppressed wages, or clear systemic discrimination, or betrayal? Is the invisible ledger just ignoring reality?
This is where we have to apply critical thinking and acknowledge the friction. The law of compensation balances across cycles and systems, not across every single moment or transaction. Systemic unfairness exists, and it must be fought directly, but even within that larger system, your personal ledger of character continues to accrue.
So the immediate sting of betrayal is real, but the system guarantees a larger delayed balance.
Yes, we have to avoid assessing the verdict in the middle of the trial. Short-term imbalance tests our faith, but the underlying architecture of reality remains balanced across a broader timeline. Your challenge is to honor the pain without letting it compromise your purpose.
And the first step is emotional honesty, rather than just forcing positivity.
You have to name the sting of unfairness. This is not fair. This hurts. Spiritual bypassing, plastering forced positivity over genuine pain allows resentment and cynicism to thrive in that unacknowledged sorrow. You have the right to feel cheated, but once you acknowledge it, you have to redirect that energy toward constructive compensation.
The case study of Sarah's startup betrayal shows how this seemingly devastating imbalance can be repurposed for a greater return.
Sarah was ousted by her co-founder just as the company took off. She experienced profound betrayal. But instead of focusing her energy on a protracted lawsuit driven by resentment, she maintained her values and redirected her passion into consultancy. She chose to help founders design fair, robust partnership agreements.
She used her loss as a high-value data point.
Compensation arrived not as a quick settlement, but as a new, thriving vocation that was perfectly aligned with her integrity and experience. The return was a higher quality, a sense of meaning and ethical purpose than the immediate financial return she might have won in court. The law often repurposes loss into future gains, provided the giver maintains their integrity during the setback.
The danger, though, is the temptation to just shut down entirely.
Emotional shutdown is so destructive. When you tell yourself, "I'll never invest that much emotional energy or effort again," you are proactively closing the outflow valve, which, by necessity, also cuts off the inflow. Closing the circuit makes imbalance a self-fulfilling prophecy. It ensures no compensation can ever arrive.
So we should reframe unreciprocated effort.
View unreciprocated effort as an investment in a long-term universal trust, one that's operating on compound interest. You made the deposit, now you trust the system. This shifts your posture from being a victim who sees the world as hostile to being a long-term shareholder, recognizing that the maturity date is uncertain, but the eventual return is guaranteed by the physics of balance. The law of compensation is impartial. The same law that returns generosity with abundance ensures that negative actions, dishonesty, exploitation, casual harm, are liabilities that are never forgiven, only awaiting the precise moment for settlement.
This isn't moral judgment, it's just precise arithmetic. We see this in the catastrophic failures of organizations, like the Bright Star example.
Right. Bright Star executives rationalized shaving honesty off the ledgers for 13 quarters, smoothing their earnings and deceiving investors. The delay made them feel untouchable. But the collapse, when it came, was a sudden proportional return of the deception. It eroded trust completely, causing mass job losses, reputation destruction, and legal action. The dark side is characterized by that slow buildup and then a sudden, devastating release when the debt is finally called in.
And greed always carries these additional, often internal, fees.
Greed hoarding inflow without proportional contribution generates returns that include customer complaints, churn, isolation, and often physical ailments. Look at Carter, the salesman. He had incredible technical prowess, but his manipulative intent, his greed for short-term commission, slowly ate away at his professional reputation. His manipulative energy eventually isolated him, and his body mirrored that internal stress through chronic health issues.
We also need to be wary of the boomerang effect of casual harm, the small things we just brush off.
Small acts of disrespect, a sarcastic remark directed at a coworker, a thoughtless online comment, or chronic lateness that wastes other people's time. They generate a friction that eventually bounces back. Demoralizing a colleague whose incompetence later forces you to do extra work, it's a perfect example. Your momentary barb returns in sleepless nights spent finishing the proposal all by yourself.
But the material emphasizes that negative cycles aren't life sentences.
They're invitations to recalibrate through restitution. Restitution, a genuine apology, correcting a public misstatement, returning borrowed money. It converts a liability into a credit. It reestablishes integrity.
The example of Olivia, the cafe owner, shows this perfectly.
Olivia rejected some slightly discolored produce to maintain her hygiene standards, taking a minor revenue dip for the day. A lot of owners would just rationalize using it. But her integrity prioritizing well-being over margin paid off instantly. Customers noticed and they rewarded her priority. Her integrity brought in record sales the following month as customers demonstrated their loyalty to her higher ethical standard. She actively converted a potential liability, the poor produce, into a credit, which was an unshakable reputation.
Okay, we've established the rules of the ledger. Now we need a blueprint for conscious, sustainable creation. Strategy is the trellis, right? It provides the structure, so spontaneity, the bloom can flourish. It's the antithesis of just living reactively.
Conscious strategy means strategically allocating your effort across the three spheres of contribution, or what we call your pulse: intimate, professional, and societal.
Let's detail the unique compensation you get from each sphere.
The intimate sphere, your health, mindset, rest that grants fast, high-quality compensation like endorphins, vitality, clarity. This has to be safeguarded first because it funds the other two. Then the professional sphere, your job, craft, skill that yields monetary and reputational compensation. Here, you prioritize high-leverage tasks, the ones that maximize the value V in the EVR equation. And finally, the societal sphere community, advocacy, mentorship. This yields indirect, delayed compensation, like the literacy tutor meeting a COO at a fundraiser. Neglecting any one of these spheres creates imbalance.
And the ultimate goal is to achieve the flow state, where balance becomes your default operating system, making success a natural byproduct rather than this constant struggle.
Flow is sustained by rituals, repeated behavior that's linked to your identity, not the outcome like writing in a journal before you check your email, or a nightly reflection on what value you add to that day. These anchor your self-image as a person who is committed to contribution, regardless of any immediate external feedback.
And flow requires mastering the art of receiving without guilt.
Absolutely. The final step is accepting all forms of compensation, money, compliments, opportunities, without deflection. Practicing standing still and just saying, "Thank you, your words mean a lot," after a speech, as the speaker did, that unlocked his compensation valve, leading to more frequent and higher paid engagements. Releasing the shame around receiving sustains the entire cycle. #tag outro.
So we've now audited the ledger, we've dismantled scarcity, and hopefully engineered a way towards continuous, balanced compensation. The central thesis holds. Success is not a dice roll. It is the arithmetic of exchange governed by an impartial principle. The law works even when we forget about it.
You now possess the tools to audit your own ledger, to track your EVR, and to navigate the inevitable imbalance and delayed gratification. Your strategy should be simple. Give because giving is who you choose to be, not because you're tallying points for reward.
The law of compensation demands self-respect as fervently as it demands altruism. It requires you to treat your own ledger with the same integrity that you expect from the universe.
So as you move forward from here, ask yourself this provocative thought. Am I modeling the same level of integrity and generosity toward myself, my time, my rest, my values, that I demand from the universe?